Snow White, Part 3. When evening came, and the dwarfs returned home, they found Snow White lying on the ground. No breath passed her lips, and they were afraid that she was quite dead. They lifted her up, and combed her hair, and washed her face with wine and water, but all was in vain. So they laid her down upon a bier, and all seven watched and bewailed her 3 whole days, and then they proposed to bury her, but her cheeks were still rosy, and her face looked just as it did while she was alive, so they said, "We will never bury her in the cold ground." And they made a coffin of glass so that they might still look at her, and wrote her name upon it in golden letters, and that she was a king's daughter. Then the coffin was placed upon the hill, and one of the dwarfs always sat by it and watched. And the birds of the air came, too, and bemoaned Snow White. First of all came an owl, and then a raven. But at last came a dove. And thus Snow White lay for a long, long time, and still only looked as though she were asleep, for she was even now as white as snow, and as red as blood, and as black as ebony. At last a prince came, and called at the dwarf's house, and he saw Snow White, and read what was written in golden letters. Then he offered the dwarfs money, and earnestly prayed them to let him take her away, but they said, "We will not part with her for all the gold in the world." At last, however, they had pity on him, and gave him the coffin. But the moment he lifted it up to carry it home with him, the piece of apple fell from between her lips, and Snow White awoke, and exclaimed, "Where am I?" And the prince answered, "Thou art safe with me." Then he told her all that had happened, and said, "I love you better than all the world. Come with me to my father's palace, and you shall be my wife." Snow White consented, and went home with the prince, and everything was prepared with great pomp and splendor for their wedding. To the feast was invited, among the rest, Snow White's old enemy, the queen, and, as she was dressing herself in fine, rich clothes, she looked in the glass, and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true. Of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who?" And the glass answered, "Thou, lady, art the loveliest here, I ween, but lovelier far is the new-made queen." When she heard this, the queen started with rage, but her envy and curiosity were so great that she could not help setting out to see the bride. And when she arrived, and saw that it was no other than Snow White, whom she thought had been dead a long while, she choked with passion, and fell ill, and died. But Snow White and the prince lived, and reigned happily over that land, many, many years.